Well, Sharleen, we were only just 2 months ago all hanging out, staying up way too late in the land of sunlight all the time in Norway. And it was so fun. And it's always, I do love continuing to pick your brain about your critical perspectives about our field and about adventure therapy and some of the things we might be missing, some of the things we're not catching, and all these things, especially around our events. And we get to hang out in a month. Embarrassingly, I don't think I actually know what the ABET dates are. I did finally register. Graham twisted my arm to make me do it. But so sometime in October, we're all catching up again anyway, and you're doing some other presentations as well. So I was really excited about this idea, and I had told you that my wife works in travel, and she said to me, "Why don't they pay to just have young people that are removed from home on to go do cool things?" And then it turns out sometimes they do, and you're part of that process. So I know that we'll address the elephant in the room, that you're not having the best feeling today, that not feeling the greatest, which is not just nerves and butterflies and things like that. But thank you still so much for doing this, because I think, especially for the international people that have registered who are probably asleep and things like that, that this is a really interesting topic to a lot of us. So take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Will. I just want to start, as we often do in Australia, acknowledging the land that we are all meeting on. So I myself am in Darkinjung country, and just acknowledging elders past, present and emerging, and paying our respects. So yeah, if everyone just takes a moment to think about where they are. Yeah, as Will said, my name is Sharleen. I'm a coordinator with PIC. Professional Individualised Care is what PIC stands for. I've been with PIC now for over 3 years. In my current role with PIC, I have two primary focuses, that kind of programs that I work on. One of them is what we're going to talk about today, the Travel and Assessment Projects program, which I'm lucky enough that Joanna is also in this Zoom today, who works with me on that program. The other primary focus I have is building PIC's version of kind of supported independent living, which is what we call ambulant care. So yeah, they're kind of my two worlds. The other world of PIC that we do is therapeutic home-based care. So the whole model of PIC, we'll talk about that a bit first, just to give everyone a bit of context of how we work. The first thing I'm actually going to show is a little video that we have. And it does talk about home-based settings, therapeutic home-based settings, because that's the core work of PIC. That will just help everyone understand kind of the model when we go on to talk about why we have the travel and assessment projects run the way we run, the relationship-based model that we used. It's just a bit helpful to understand the model, where it came from and how PIC kind of started. So I'll just start with that.
Yeah, Sharleen, what we might start that over really quick. I'll just pause.
Oh yeah, what's happening?
But you probably know a few like me. I'm in the out-of-home care system. Tough background, tough circumstances, tough attitude, and a tough time finding the right way to move forward and make the most of my life. Sometimes it's hard making a good decision in bad circumstances. But I've done my best. I've been moved around a bit, different placements, lots of different workers. I've found ways to cope. I know the future's not always going to be easygoing, but I'd like to learn how to live better. Like, maybe there's another way, a better way. A way that offers more connections, more stability, more chances. I'd pick that. That's a pun. PIC, or PIC, stands for Professional Individualised Care. It's been going in Germany for the past 25 years, and they've had great success. Success we could use here, I reckon. It works like this. Instead of lots of different placements and experts and therapists all having a go, you get one professional therapeutic carer. That's not just a random selection. PIC gets to know who we are, what we need, and matches us with the right person. These are experts in their field with uni qualifications and heaps of experience who want to work with fewer clients for greater impact. And because they're professionals, they get paid like one. So if they specialise in something like art therapy or even adventure-based social work, they're matched with the right young person for their skills. And our skills, what we've learned along the way, well, those strengths are recognised too. So you've got the professional help, but it's personal too. In most cases, the young person lives with the professional therapeutic carer in their house. So it's an ongoing, long-term, one-on-one real relationship. Not shift workers, not short-term connections, but real relationships. It's got the best bits of foster care. It's individualised with real relationships. And it's got the best bit of intensive out-of-home care too, with the professional intervention. And isn't that what we're all after? In one safe space, you get care, kindness, and the tools to help navigate the rest of your life. That's pretty cool. Look, the Germans did their research. The individualised approach of PIC means faster client progress. Here's a graph, if you're a fan. And they described only 7.65% of cases as unsuccessful. You've got to admit, that's pretty impressive. It's also financially competitive with the existing out-of-home care models in Australia. PIC is all about learning how to build good relationships, sound mental health, and being an active and positive member of society. That's kids who grow up not ending up in jail, on the dole, or in and out of rehab. And, well, in the long term, that's going to save lots of dosh. We all just want to have a good life, and this PIC looks like it could give me a great head start. PIC offers a safe, stable, and supportive environment, genuine, lasting relationships, and professional therapeutic interventions. Don't we all long for that? Let's hope it gets to be my PIC.
Okay. So that's, just as I said, a brief kind of introduction to PIC and the model of care that we operate on. So as the video mentioned, the model of care came from Germany. Travel and assessment projects have also been operating in Germany for over 20 years. And they grew from this individualized approach, that idea of what was existing in the system wasn't meeting the needs of the young person. So the whole model is when you find a young person, you create what that young person needs in order to feel safe, in order to build relationship, and in order to move forward with their lives. So that's where the travel and assessment projects kind of developed for them. Jared Wheatley, who is the CEO of PIC, he was the one that brought this model over to Australia. And so PIC has been operating in New South Wales now in out-of-home care for over 5 years. As I said, our core work is those therapeutic home-based settings, but we do also have travel and assessment projects, which have been operating for around 3 years now, and the ambulant care, which we've been doing for about a year now as well. And they're all based on that real relationship, genuine connection model. So if we go to that kind of why do we need travel and assessment projects? Why do PIC think that we need them? And I think most people generally agree. So the problem with out-of-home care or in out-of-home care in New South Wales is that a lot of young people end up in what we call alternative care arrangements or short-term settings, as well as residential homes, now called intensive therapeutic care settings. And all of these are what we would label as an institutionalized setting. So they work on shift work. There's usually an 8-hour shift, one during the day, one in the afternoon, one overnight. And that's what the young people get used to. They get used to those rotating workers in their lives. So it's never really a genuine connection. And that's not a criticism of the youth workers that work in that area, because I know many youth workers that really care for young people. This is just how the system is established, how it's been kind of developed over time to meet those adult needs and what's needed to create care settings for young people. Because unfortunately, we do have a lot of young people in out-of-home care. So from that, with the rotating shift workers, young people adapt to their environment. We all know that. So they develop their coping mechanisms, their survival strategies with this idea of this 8-hour connection. That's their period with this adult. And then in the next 8 hours, they're going to have another adult. Usually that adult will come back in a couple of days or so, but it's these 8-hour time slots that they're used to. So that means if there's an incident on shift, that young person might not be able to debrief or repair that relationship for several days with that adult. By then, that adult's done their own processing, and it kind of creates this not genuine, not real relationship with that young person that you see when you're in a home-based setting. And the problem that that creates for out-of-home care is a challenge in determining what that young person would need for their long-term placement needs. So if they're used to having those rotating shift workers and those behaviours, those young people often struggle to transition into home-based settings where there is kind of one, maybe two adults for long periods of time. They don't have those skills in relationship repair. They're not sure, or they're not used to practicing those skills. That means they often have multiple foster placement breakdowns when they do try to transition into either foster homes or into group homes with other young people. And it really creates difficulty for the adults in the out-of-home care system to determine what that young person would need in that home-based setting, because they've never seen that young person actually engaged in a genuine relationship. They have not seen what kind of things will come up for them, and they don't know how to respond to them. So we kind of end up in this loop of young people rotating through multiple foster placements or multiple short-term settings over and over, and then eventually residing in those kind of longer-term residential settings.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the target cohort that we have for travel and assessment projects in PIC. We do have some young people that have gone on travel and assessment projects from kinship care arrangements or foster care arrangements. But the kind of real target cohort that we're looking to kind of get out of these institutionalized settings and give a break from those hotel settings is those young people that are kind of stuck in those short terms. And the DCJ, which is for those that aren't Australian or New South Wales based, the Department of Communities and Justice is who does our child protection in New South Wales. So that's DCJ for short. Please do jump in the chat or call out if I use too many acronyms. I get very good at talking in acronyms when I kind of go into this world. But
well, Sharleen, I was just curious what came up to me. I'm taking a little bit of notes as we go through. How did in the 1 minute tweet form, how did you get involved with this, and was this a passion of yours that made it easy to get involved in?
Yeah, I mean, travel is a passion of mine, so that made it really easy. But it was when this is an idea that PIC has wanted to bring since when they started, and it's something that's come from that German model. And so when I heard about it, I was like, yep, I think that I can help make that happen. And so that's how, like, it's not an idea that I came up with. I wish I did. But as I said, they've been doing this in Germany for over 25 years. I was lucky enough to just spend some time over there with our German colleagues, kind of really learning about how it evolved and the process there that they kind of go through to make this happen. Being in Europe, they're also fortunate enough to sometimes have home-based settings abroad. So even though they're a German-based company, they might have settings in Spain or Greece or Hungary, with kind of a similar idea behind it, except that they don't physically travel. They're in that home-based setting, but in another country.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it just reminded me of, I went to, like six or 7 years ago, my partner Renee and I, we ended up going to Greenland, and we were up in northern Canada in the Arctic Circle and passed over into Greenland. and Greenland was colonized by the Danish. And it just sparked a memory for me that one of the things we saw, we went to this orphanage that coins themselves as the world's most remote orphanage. And the Danish, even though being a smaller country than Australia, the United States, and North America, they spend $8 to 1 on Indigenous well-being in Greenland, compared to the rest of us on average. And I'm probably making that stat up a little bit from my memory. But when young people don't want to go to school, young Inuit, Indigenous young people, they'll get them on, they'll say, here's an elder who has a fishing boat who's going fishing for 3 months. Do you want to go? And they'll go. So the young people in those communities have often been to way more countries than a lot of us have, because they're traveling around and they're with somebody and they're working and they're treated like they count. And it's not a professional relationship in the sense of I'm your therapist, you're my client. It's much more, now we need you to help out on this boat. We got some fish to catch, or whatever it is they do. So I really like this idea of thinking outside the box. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's right. There is actually a project that I heard about in Germany where the guy is now captain of a fishing, a cargo vessel, and the young person works with him, and they go up and down the Rhine, and he works on the boat, and he's part of the crew, and that's now like his family and his community, and he is paid, he has a job, but that's his home setting as well. So it's the great thing about this model is that anything is kind of possible, really, within safety reasons, but it's really individualizing it based on the young person and the travel project specialist skills in this. So that kind of actually leads in perfectly as well to what exactly is a travel and assessment project, because that's, I think, what a lot of people kind of go, what do you mean you travel with young people? And yes, that is what we mean. So there are some projects that are stationary assessment projects that don't travel. That's been for very specific reasons. So, for example, we had a request to reconnect a young person in with their father because there was consideration of restoring that young person, and they needed to determine what the relationship looked like and whether there was kind of interest from both parties to really work through that process together. The young person lived about 5 hours from their dad. So we took them to the town where dad lived, and the travel project specialist and the young person stayed there for 4 weeks. And every day they just did something with dad, just to see what that relationship was like, to see how it would go when there was moments of struggle, and to help determine what kind of supports were needed to help that restoration. So that's a travel and assessment project that didn't travel as such. They were in one location, but typically most of our projects, they travel. We do say around 4 to 12 weeks, so it is a short duration. They can be longer if that's what's needed and in the best interest of the young person and the travel project specialist is able to do it. We don't generally do shorter than 4 weeks unless there is a specific reason that for that young person that's needed. But generally it's hard to build that genuine connection and real relationship in that short period of time. So really, 4 to 12 weeks is kind of the minimum time frame that we'd like to look at for a project. It is one travel project specialist and one young person. So we look at what we call matching in PIC, and we look at the travel project specialist skill set, their experience and their interests, and we match that to the young person. So there's no set eligibility referral criteria for a travel and assessment project, because what really matters is that fit between the travel project specialist and the young person. Not every young person will be a fit with every travel project specialist. So that's one of the things I love in PIC, because if you have a young person, or when DCJ have a young person they want us to work with, we're really able to look at that and kind of go, okay, who do we know that would be the best fit for this? People are used to kind of going, oh, what's your age bracket? What gender do they have to be? What behaviours do you do and don't take? But we actually look at that match between the specialist and the young person, rather than having a set list of criteria that's eligible for referral. And then every project is different, and it is just the one travel project specialist and the young person for the duration of the project. It's not shift work role. So when we tailor that experience, what kind of things can we tailor? Everything, down to the activities. So we have had, you know, young people go surfing, camel riding, snorkeling with seals down south, snorkeling on the Great Barrier Reef up north. There was a Segway tour around Uluru, hiking. I think one young person went skydiving, dolphin watching, theme parks, bike riding, kayaking, like whatever that young person and that travel project specialist are interested in doing, we can tailor that in to the travel and assessment project. The same as the location, which state, even which country are we going to go to? So we haven't yet done an international travel project, but we were very close pre-pandemic to starting that. We had one that was being planned. So unfortunately, COVID hit us like it did many other industries, but we're now looking to get that back up and running again. You know, starting I think with New Zealand, but looking at other countries that travel and assessment specialists want to go to. The itinerary, how long is it? How long do you spend in each spot? You know, that will depend on how many rest days does the young person need? Are they used to traveling? How do they go traveling in the car? Maybe they can only handle 2 or 3 hours at a time. You know, all of that's going to factor in to how that itinerary is planned. What kind of accommodation are we going to use? Do we have a mixture of Airbnbs, camping, eco lodges, holiday and caravan parks, apartments, resorts? Like, it all is tailored completely to what that project is going to look like. And there's been some really amazing experiences for young people in that, with like say holiday and caravan parks, for instance, where a lot of people had previously been so concerned about the young person's behaviour that they didn't want to take them to those kind of settings because they were concerned about how they might interact with other young people. But because of that relationship that's been built with the travel project specialist during the project, they're able to take them into those new settings and help coach them through, kind of see those earlier warning signs because they know them so well. They get to know them that well from being with them 24/7. The transport can be tailored. Are we going to fly? Are we going to drive? Is it going to be a like camper van? You know, there was one project that went to Tasmania on the ferry. So boats are involved, like trains, buses. It all depends on what the goal of that project is, how that young person likes to travel. You know, we've had young people that flew for the first time on these kind of projects as well. Education is tailored. So that's a question I get a lot, is what about school? A lot of the young people that we take on projects aren't engaged in school at the time. If they are, then we can get online work, which that is a bonus of COVID, is a lot of schools are now used to doing that, so it's not much of a problem. But we also build in that natural learning, so visiting museums, the like animal sanctuaries, like there was a koala hospital at Port Macquarie where you get to learn about koalas and how they care for them when they're injured, releasing them back into the wild. There's art exhibitions, there's cultural tours that will go on. All of those kind of natural learnings that you get out in the world, and those experiences from travel. All of that completely tailored to where that young person is at and where that young person wants to get to on the project. And then family reconnection, as I spoke about with that other project, that's something that we can do. So we could tailor a project around when family visits are scheduled in. We've had one young person reconnect with family and after the project ultimately move in with their family instead of returning back to Sydney. All of those kinds of things, we can look at the individual situation for that young person and tailor that experience. So it is hard when people ask, what is a travel and assessment project? Because it really depends on the project specialist, the young person. What are we trying to achieve? How do we plan to achieve that? What's your skill set? Because everything is tailored, everything is individualized. No projects have looked the same. Even with the same travel project specialist with the same age group, they're always completely different. But really, that's that core principle of traveling with a young person, having those experiences and being with them 24/7, building that relationship and helping them to learn different coping strategies or different regulation techniques, you know, maybe learning new skills, all of those things. But it's quite literally also traveling with a young person, which is pretty cool. They get to see a lot of things that they don't usually get to see.
So you use the three words are really interesting. So you have travel, which makes sense as the word.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have assessment and then project. So I wonder, while you're traveling, what assessment is being done?
Yep. Next slide, Will.
Okay, I'll shut up.
No, it's all good. So that does feed into the next slide, because that first element, as you say, is travel. But people then often go, oh, so I can take a kid on a holiday. And at its core, yes, that's what's happening.
Yeah,
but what we also need to realize is these young people in out-of-home care, they have complex trauma needs. They might have disabilities. They might have mental health struggles, social difficulties, alcohol and drug concerns. Like, every young person's different. And so for that reason, that's where that kind of that PIC model comes in, of that professional care. And that is where we had the assessment provided in the project as well. So our travel project specialists, they are professionals. They have industry recognised qualifications and experience working with young people. So we've had travel project specialists that have experience working in youth work, maybe in residential youth work. We've had social workers take on this role, different kind of skill sets and experience and different levels, and then we match based on that. But the idea of that is where that assessment comes in. So that professional has those skills and that experience to respond to the young person in a therapeutic manner when we do see those coping mechanisms, those survival strategies. They can look at how that's presenting, see those early warning signs, and maybe help them to implement a new, maybe emotional regulation technique, for example. And the benefit of having it with a professional that's with you 24/7 is that can look a lot more natural. So instead of a young person maybe having to visit their therapeutic specialist at the set time on, Thursday at 10 a.m. and they're not in the mood to talk, having a professional that's with them 24/7, that's building a genuine relationship, they can have that conversation at the breakfast table, because maybe that's when the young person is the most regulated. So they can have that conversation. They can talk about something that helps to keep them calm. They can practice it when they're calm, and then they can help the young person to implement it when they're not so calm. They could also even tailor in an activity that's going to create a little bit of tolerable fear or anxiety. So maybe like a high ropes course one day, or snorkeling out in the ocean where they know they're going to be in deep water and the young person gets a bit scared. And this travel project specialist can help them practice that technique in those environments where they can see how it can help bring them back down to baseline. And then the travel project specialist will also be there when something goes wrong and the young person isn't coping, when maybe a plane is delayed and they're stuck in an airport for 8 hours and they're bored and their iPad's not charged and they can't find their charger for their phone and they don't want to read and they're getting really dysregulated by all the loud noises. That same person that taught them that technique at breakfast, that helped them practice it in the kind of like more tolerable environment, can remind them again and guide them through that process. So by having that one person there 24/7 that has those therapeutic skills, they can help them implement new ways. They could also just help them to understand what's happening in the world around them. So that's really important, that our travel project specialists are professionals. We also then provide this information to the other adults that are in the young person's life. So we provide a weekly update to what's called the case managing agency in New South Wales. So that will generally be the DCJ, the department in New South Wales that's responsible for child protection. And we'll provide those learnings back, you know, what have we learned that helps this week? We also provide the young person's voice, and the young person knows this. It's not a secret. They know that we're communicating with their caseworkers or their carers and looking at what their longer term options are. And we'll have those conversations with them. And again, by being that 24/7, it means that that conversation could happen sitting on the beach. It could be driving in the car where the young person feels comfortable talking, on a hike, you know, this being in the outdoor kind of therapy theme of this week. I think a lot of people here would be familiar with the fact that different environments can help different people to feel comfortable and talking about challenging things. So we're able to tailor the project to have those environments for the young person. And because the travel project specialist has those therapeutic skills and they're working within that skill set, they can kind of gather that information from the long term, gather that information from the young person, and we can feed that back to the adults in their lives. We also provide at the end of the project an assessment report. So if it's been an 8-week project, 12-week project, you know, even longer, will depend on how much information we've got in that time, what we've learned about that young person. But we do provide that back to DCJ as well, and we'll often have recommendations in there around what that young person has shared about what they want for their future. Was there something that they really enjoyed that they should continue? Maybe they tried a new sport and we think that they should be enrolled in that. Did they love surfing? Can they live somewhere near a beach? All of these different things. Do they really get along well with males? Do they have issues with female authority? Those kinds of things to be factored in so that in their long-term placement decisions, they're more likely to be successful in that setting. Does that answer your question, Will, about the assessment part?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. That was, it's just so, it's really interesting because I have always been a travel person. Like you said, I've got a love for travel. I'm a very nervous flyer that my clients would probably have to regulate me on a plane, or we just don't fly together because I'll be less than useful. But I do think it's really interesting that this idea that I've listened to everything you've said in the words like real relationships, being there, you know, there's not a lot of people that understand what it's like to sleep under the stars next to the people you work with. There's a magic to that, or to go on a hike and go, should we go get food at a cafe? And I did an interview this morning and a few therapists were saying, what about confidentiality in the cafe? And I said, yeah, I'm not wearing a shirt that says social worker, like yeah. I'm invisible, you know? Yeah. And so the outdoors and doing these adventure things often does look more invisible than walking into the clinic. And it just makes so much sense to go and do these things and to go see the world and have fun and be together. And I love that you use the word real relationships. And Graham will know, only in the past few years has this term gained some research support as well as a term that is something the client has to be a part of an emotionally charged relationship that feels genuine and real, that has nothing to do with piece of paper on the wall or whatever technique I use, that we're there together doing cool things. And Rick does similar work with this with people, just going and living together and doing something nice. So I think that's I don't know. I mean, as someone who traveled, and traveling is so important, and I went to summer camp for very long periods at end as a child, me going to summer camp was way more helpful and beneficial to who I am now than anything I did in the classroom. So it just makes too much sense.
Yeah, and that's the thing, as you say, like travel project specialists are not working in a therapy client relationship. So we don't have the same kind of boundaries around like we call it professional nearness in PIC rather than professional boundaries, because whilst you're using those therapeutic skills, you are not the clinician for that young person in this role. This is a caregiving role to that young person. But that person has the skills and ability to respond to those behaviours that, you know, often general foster carers don't have. And that's through no fault of their own. They are, you know, anyone that takes in a young person has a huge heart. But if you don't have an understanding of trauma or complex needs or mental health, then it can be really challenging to respond to some of these young people within your home setting. And so that is the cohort of young people that we work with in PIC. Many of our young people have had multiple foster placement breakdowns. And so having people that are skilled and understanding how to respond can help them to learn different ways to regulate their behaviour, and can help them to build those skills to be more successful in the future. So it's that professional nearness, having that professional understanding, but not having to abide by those boundaries, because it is a real caregiver role that you take on.
Yeah.
So, and that's also because individualized, the second kind of core value of PIC, because we have that 1-to-1 ratio, we have the luxury of tailoring every project. So when you're in a group setting, you maybe have 10 young people, you have to figure out how to get all 10 young people to engage in an activity maybe, or to get everyone on board. You know, we just have one. So we can really listen to what that young person wants and make that happen. You know, it can really be, do you want to, might even be every day going, oh, do we want to spend another day here, or do we want to go to the next location? There's just two people to make that decision, the young person and the travel project specialist. So they can have those conversations themselves. They can make that decision. They set the itinerary. They set the activity. If they don't want to go surfing, they don't have to go surfing. That's okay. They get to make those choices as to what activities they want to do and what they want to engage in. It's also that each project is tailored to the travel and assessment, to the travel project specialist skill set. So when we look at that matching and we're looking at how that young person presents with those coping mechanisms and those survival strategies, we also discuss with the travel project specialist, how is that going to impact on you? So this is a 24/7 role, and the travel project specialist needs to have an understanding of those behaviours and be aware whether or not they can or can't cope with that. And so we look at that in matching to make sure we have that right fit. If there's a travel project specialist that specifically struggles with self-harm, we're not going to match them with a young person that presents with a lot of self-harm behaviour, because they're not going to be able to meet that young person's needs. That's okay. There are other young people that don't have that as their coping mechanism that we can look at matching on a project instead. So it's about both of those people matching that skill set with the needs and the interests of the young person. And that also goes as to interests. If one travel project specialist wants to do 8 to 12 weeks of driving up the East Coast surfing, and the young person doesn't want to go anywhere near the beach, that's not going to be a good fit. So we need to look at that, all of those things, and make sure that we have the right fit for that project.
Sharleen, I have Rick has a comment here that is there a meet and greet before someone engages in a 4 to 12 week adventure travel project?
Yep. So again, it's tailored to each young person how exactly we do that. The travel project specialist will be involved in the meetings with the current caregivers to learn about that young person. We get a lot of file information that we go through as well and read through, and the travel project specialist gets all that. But really those conversations with whoever is day to day with that child, so maybe the youth workers in the hotel, what do those things look like? We go through all of that and we make sure that we're confident in offering a project. And then the travel project specialist will meet with the young person and offer the project. So that's important as well. It is an offer. We don't direct young people to come on the projects, and we're very clear with all of our partners that it is not a direction the young person has to want to engage in this process. Often we'll kind of have that meet and greet, and we will be departing on the project within kind of 24 to 48 hours. And I think that sounds really shocking that we would do that. But generally, young people are either very excited for this opportunity and they want to go and they're ready to go, or they're not. And if they're not, that's okay. But trying to convince a young person to take this on if they're not ready generally doesn't work as well. They don't get the most out of it. They spend too much time scared, afraid, they're not actually
Right.
comfortable maybe with that idea yet. So generally it is just one meet and greet that they have. We look to have another adult there that the young person knows and trusts, that we've also spoken to about the project, so that they don't have any fears or concerns, and they can support the young person to make that decision. But yeah, there'll be one kind of meet and greet between them, and then generally they're hitting the road within 24 to 48 hours.
Wow.
It is also, if 2 weeks into a project or something it's not working for a young person, we don't make them stay just because they've committed to an 8 to 12 weeks. We'll have those conversations with them. If it's not what they thought, if they're not coping with moving, we might try and maybe move less so that they can get more comfortable. But if it's really not working and it's not in the best interest of a young person, we won't keep them on a project purely because we had planned an 8-week project. We'll work with our partners at what options they have to come back to, and the young person can make that choice to end the project early if they really aren't comfortable with the process.
So you brought up the staffing, and this is something, as someone who has run a practice where I want staff, and we do 2-week expeditions, which for me, I'd much prefer 12 weeks. It's way too short for me, but I know I'm in the minority there. And as you know, our good friend Kyle, we're good to just go and disappear for a while with a group of kids.
Yeah.
That finding staff that are, and people that are willing to, first off, a group is one thing. One-on-one, I would actually find even harder, because to keep someone engaged and to keep their attention and also to not get tired. Well, I imagine it's easy to get tired and bored traveling with just one person that you're in a caregiving role with, who you're not necessarily their caregiver all the time. And I wonder, how do you vet the people how do you find the right people? How do you know that there are people who are capable of driving up and down the coast, going surfing with a young person who wants to go surfing, and then 2 weeks in, the young person says, can we turn inland? I don't want to go surfing anymore. I want to go climb some mountains or something. Yep. How do you find the right people?
It's hard. Yeah. That's the short answer of it. It's hard. So, and Jo maybe can speak to this if she wants to jump in, because Jo has been one of our travel project specialists in this role, and she is now one of our coordinators coordinating other travel project specialists. But it is difficult, because the idea, it's great, right? Like, you get to take kids and you get to do awesome things. You can, like all the things we talked about, snorkeling, surfing, camping, you get to do that with the young person as well. So there's some amazing perks to this role. But it's challenging. And as someone that's traveled, even with another adult, you travel with someone for like 2 weeks at a time, there's going to be points where you're a bit sick of each other. Usually, it's pretty rare that doesn't happen. So that's something that we look at through. It is a long recruitment process. A travel project specialist is an authorised foster carer in the end of their recruitment process. That's part of how this role works. So that is a 3 to 6 month generally recruitment process that we're spending. And that's where PIC's relationship model, that applies to every role that we have. So that applies to us as a coordinator as well. So we are going out and meeting our travel project specialists. We're talking for hours on the phone about these exact things. What are you going to do when you're tired? And the young person's pushing you, and the young person's figured out that that's what annoys you. Like, what do you do to cope? Do you need to be able to take some space and go for a run every morning? Or, what if the young person doesn't want to go surfing and you want to go and you can't leave them alone? Making sure that people understand the limitations and the challenges that are present in this role is really important as well. So as much as it can be super fun, there are those times where it is challenging. And so it is hard to find the right kind of people that want to do this role and that can understand that. But also, a lot of people really love adventure. Like, a lot of people really love those things. And a lot of people really see the value in being able to offer that to young people. So they see the real learnings that they've had traveling, and that young people or any person can learn a lot more being on the road for 8 weeks than they might learn in a classroom for 8 weeks, particularly for young people with trauma or disability and mental health that struggle in those mainstream settings. So it's not easy to find the right people is the short answer to do this role. But when you find the right person, like, it works really, really well. So someone that gets all those different facets of it. And that's why when you said to me yesterday about how cool is that you take kids on holidays, I'm always quick to point out this is not just a holiday. It is also a challenging role.
Yeah, totally. Because I think even going on expedition that looks like wilderness therapy, yeah, it's kind of a holiday, but it's kind of really hard work at the same time.
Yeah.
And with a group, you can disappear. You can leave a group to get on with it. With one person, it's much harder to disappear, especially with someone you're responsible for.
Yeah. So I think most of this we've kind of spoken through just naturally already, but it's not a shift work role, and that is a challenge for someone to be invested in that for that duration of time. It's professional nearness, so you are not a therapist in this role, so you are using those therapeutic skills. And a lot of people that do engage in this role, either as the travel project specialist or even in our professional therapeutic care as our home-based settings, what draws people to this is that opportunity to use those skills with fewer young people, but for kind of like more maximize that outcome. So by really building that genuine relationship, they're able to help that young person to start to feel safe, which we all know is really important for trauma processing, that they have that environment where they can feel safe, that they can experience what genuine care looks like. And that's part of this role as well. So what does it mean for a young person on a travel and assessment project? I think that we've actually probably spoken about most of this. But as I said, it's that opportunity for them to practice that real relationship with an adult. They can practice those repairs. They can see what that looks like when there is an adult there consistently with them. Will, you've mentioned wilderness therapy, and I worked in a wilderness therapy role in Canada. And the difference that you had with young people when they saw that you were also there sleeping in the snow, or that you had to carry your pack through that hike with them. You weren't someone just telling them what to do. You were there with them for that time. That makes a huge difference. And so that's part of this as well. That travel project specialist is with you through it all. They're sitting in the airport when there is a delay. They're also annoyed that it's hot and that they've got to go for a hike, or the aircon's not working in the car, whatever it is. The motel didn't look like what we thought it was going to. They're there step by step with the young person through all those challenges.
That's right. And I think I've said this, I think I said this earlier in the week as well, that I came from, and I literally just texted Graham, who's here, about this, about we should write something about this in the future, that I came from a model. Well, my first wilderness therapy job in the States was 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. So the young people did a month in the woods, then a month at a base camp setting, and then a month at a school that they could choose to stay at as long as they wanted. Everything else was totally involuntary. And I always was if someone said, I can't make my 2 week shift, can you take it over? I'd say, sure. That means I was gone a month and a half across that time. But so there was no continuation throughout the program of our relationship. Yeah. And the next program I worked at was week on and week off. So I might do a week, get to go home, have a shower, eat normal food, and then I could come back and join the same group, or they could put me in a different group that's out there. And so one of the things that I was thinking is, one of the people I interviewed in my PhD said, I hated the weeks that this staff team was there. And I loved the weeks that because the workers were just as down in the dirt as we were. And he said, while they were hiking and tired, this one worker would run around and hype them up and run around the group and try to be fun and exciting. And the other ones it was much more drill sergeant, no talking while you hike. And this is a specific field of practice that we all cringe about, of course. But yeah, I think I like this idea of the real relationship and of doing something that has a finish, because even if it's hard and challenging, the young person knows it'll be over. There's an end point, and there's an escape, which we talk about in the complex trauma literature. So Rick has a question here, and there's a few other questions, and I'll pivot that, because I think with just about 10 minutes left, it's probably good to bring people in, if that's okay with you. So
yeah,
Rick asked,
the slides are just things we've already talked about anyway, so bring on the questions.
Oh, cool. So Rick asked, how do you've had this great experience of 12 weeks of going on an adventure, or a month, 4 to 12 weeks. So that's a longer adventure than many of us have the affordance that we go on in our own lives. How do you close that relationship after the adventure?
Yep. So short answer, as everything with PIC, it depends, and it's individualized. But so it depends on what the travel project specialist wants to do. We do have some travel project specialists that offer to stay in touch with the young person, and that's like encouraged by PIC if that's what they're willing to do. You do need to be careful if you're someone that's looking at doing this for 2 to 3 years and doing 5 projects in a year. That's a lot of young people that you're staying in touch with. But often what we've found is that where that has happened, as the young person settles back into their next setting, that contact kind of naturally tapers off. And that's how relationships work in the real world, right? Like, we don't always talk to every single person that we know every single day. We have some people that we talk to really regularly, and then others that we talk to not so regularly, but we're still connected to. And so that's what kind of naturally happens at the end of those projects. So we're honest from the start about the duration of the project. If a project is looking to extend, that's a conversation with the young person. They're involved in that as well. But they do know and they do understand that it is a time-limited thing. So they have that from the start. And then how that travel project specialist manages that with them really depends probably on what that young person needs as well. What setting are they going to next? What does that look like for them? What are their supports going to be? We might slowly transition them. We might have the travel project specialist stay back in Sydney with them for a week or 2 while they get settled in their next placement, with having that person still visit regularly and helping them get to know their new environment. Or it might literally be that they're like quite happy. So again, it's quite sad, but a lot of young people in out-of-home care are used to change, really sudden, really, solid ends. And so for some young people, it's quite normal for them just to get dropped to that new setting. The travel project specialist goes in with them, checks it out, helps them set up their stuff, and then they kind of go, yeah, bye. Like, I'm done. That's that part of my life, and now I'm in my new setting. So it really varies depending on what the young person needs and what the travel project specialist has the capacity to offer in an ongoing relationship.
Thanks for that. And then Graham got kicked out of the venue he was in, so he had to leave, but he sent me some questions, and we have one from Joanna coming up as well. What are the long-term benefits
of the projects?
Yeah, if there is.
So, I mean, what are the long-term benefits of travel? For one, anyone that has traveled will generally talk about some kind of experience and learning that they've taken from that into their next life. So the long-term benefits just can be the experience. So the different skills that they get to try, the different adventures they get to try, the different places they get to see. Like if a young person's going, I just really want to see the Great Barrier Reef, then we make that the project, right? Is how to get up there, doing all of that. There's also various levels of life skills they might learn. So we can incorporate them to learn actually how to plan a travel project, budgeting skills, meal prep, grocery planning, all of those things. We can naturally build that in because this is the duration of the project. These are things that have to happen. One of the really big benefits, though, that we see that the young person might not see. So we're generally able to change the narrative around these young people. And so one example of that is we had two brothers that had cycled through multiple foster care settings in the months before they came to PIC. They hadn't lasted anywhere longer than 2 weeks, and they're quite young. These are under 10. And we did a stationary assessment project with them. And by just having that real relationship for them, by having them with one set of carers who could understand where some of those behaviours were coming from and help them to process through that. And things like being able to get them haircuts, new uniforms, new clothes that other foster settings weren't able to do because they didn't have the certainty of that permanency, but we were able to do for them. You know, they would start to take pride in their appearance. They were excited to go to school and show their teachers or tell them about things that they'd done at home that night, that they'd been baking, or that they'd gone to Raging Waters, which is like Wet and Wild in Sydney, all of those things. And at the end of that 5-week project, the DCJ worker came back and said, we have actually changed how we talk about these 2 boys, because instead of being presented with all of the challenges that they face in a foster care setting, we can now see all of the possibilities that if we respond appropriately to them and help them and support them properly, the outcomes that can be achieved. So being able to change that narrative of how the adults around the young person can look at them and talk about them and get that positive kind of narrative happening for them, that can be really, really beneficial for their long-term kind of placement goals. So that's a really key important one that the young person doesn't generally experience or see themselves directly. They probably wouldn't realise that for many years later that that's been able to happen. But just in general, like that travel experience, as someone that's travelled a lot, that's hugely beneficial for learning experiences and that real genuine relationship that's not present in a lot of, or in most out-of-home care. So there are a lot of rules, really strict regulations around how youth workers, caseworkers can engage with young people. And because we are kind of operating under that caregiver role with those authorised foster carers, they're able to offer that real genuine connection to that young person.
Thank you, Sharleen. I think that's a really good place. I think it's so amazing. And Rachel asks, when are you bringing this to Queensland?
I actually get asked that a lot when I meet people that hear about PIC. And look, Jared Wheatley spent a lot of time building relationships with people in DCJ to get PIC up and running in New South Wales. I'm happy to support anyone else in other states that wants to get it up and running in their state. You know, this isn't even the model that we work on. That's come from Germany. We want to be collaborative. We want relationship-based care available to all young people in out-of-home care in any state. So if that's something that you think you want to do, happy for us to share our knowledge where we can. Or if you're just interested in becoming a travel project specialist, you don't have to live in New South Wales to do that. So if it's something you're interested in doing, again, reach out. I'll go back to the main slide. Just I've got my email down the bottom if you can see it.
Yeah.
Sharleen at pic.care. Yeah. Send an email and reach out.
Yeah, I think it's something that we all think naturally. I know when I talk about adventure therapy with the capital T therapy attached to it, I look back at Freud and these people who created this thing that happens in an office. And if we had a therapy session in 1901 on mute, and we had a therapy session on 2022 on mute, I don't think any of us could tell the difference. And so doing something different and getting out of the counseling room and doing things that really connect with people that also provide memories. And Joanna brought up pictures, and absolutely, pictures are a way better memory trigger than a lot of other things that we think we do. And so I just applaud this idea, and I applaud this work, and I think it's really amazing. And Sharleen, thank you so much for joining us on Wednesday, late in the day. And I really appreciate it. And I had fun with you in Norway, and I can't wait to have fun in the Adelaide Hills in just over a month. And thank you to everyone who came along, and to show a kind of different sort of adventurous approach to working with those in out-of-home care.
Thank you, Will, and thank you everyone for coming. If anyone does have any questions at any point, please do reach out.
And that's okay for those who have also registered for the recording as well?
Yeah, my email is there in the bottom right corner, Sharleen@pick.care. Always happy to hear about people that have questions. I can talk PIC travel projects, for hours and hours on end. So anyone that might be at the AVAT forum as well, by all means, just come up and say hi.
And you have presentations there as well, so that's good.
Yes, with my colleague Joe, which is very exciting.
Awesome. I can't wait. And congratulations on keeping on doing this great work. And thanks everyone for coming. And for those that are sticking around for everything, I'll see you all in the morning for Ben Knowles' chat. Thank you, Sharleen. Go drink a bit more water and feel better. And we will see you all soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Will. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.